Hey, my friends, we are at the end of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The last little bit, Peter, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy had become kings and queens of Narnia, and let's see what happens to Narnia now. And now, as you see, the story is nearly, but not quite, at the end. These two kings and two queens governed Narnia well, and long and happy was their reign. At first, much of their time was spent seeking out the remnants of the White Witch's army and destroying them. And indeed, for a long time, there would be news of evil things lurking in the wilder parts of the forest. A haunting here, a killing there, a glimpse of a werewolf one month and a rumor of a hag the next. But in the end, all that foul brood was stamped out, and they made good laws that kept the peace and saved good trees from being unnecessarily cut down, and liberated the young dwarfs from being sent to school, and generally stopped busybodies and interferers, and encouraged ordinary people who wanted to live and let live. Sounds like kind of a fun kid-run place, doesn't it? And they drove back the fierce giants, quite a different sort from Giant Rumblebuffin. Remember, he was one of the good giants. In the north of Narnia, when these ventured out across the frontier, and they entered into friendship and alliance with countries beyond the sea, and paid them visits of state, and received visits of states from them, and they themselves grew and changed as the years passed over them. And Peter, he became a tall and deep-chested man and a great warrior. And he was called King Peter the Magnificent. And Susan, she grew into a tall, gracious woman with black hair that fell almost to her feet, and the kings in the countries beyond the sea began to send ambassadors asking for her hand in marriage. And she was called Queen Susan the Gentle. Edmund was a graver and quieter man than Peter, and great in counsel and judgment. He was called King Edmund the Just. He'd learned justice, hadn't he? He'd learned what was right and wrong. But as for Lucy, she was always gay and golden-haired, and all the princes in all the parts desired her to be their queen, and her own people called her Queen Lucy the Valiant. So they lived in great joy, and if ever they remembered their life in this world, it was only as one remembers a dream. And one year it fell out that Tumnus, who was a middle-aged fawn by now and beginning to be stout, came down river and brought them news that the white stag had once more appeared in these parts. The white stag who would give you wishes if you caught him. Ooh! So these two kings and two queens, with the principal members of their court, rode a-hunting with horns and hounds to the western woods to follow the white stag. And they had not hunted long before they had sight of him. And he led them a great pace over rough and smooth and through thick and thin, till the horses, all of them, and their courtiers were tired out, and these four were still following. And they saw the stag enter into a thicket where the horses could not follow. Then said King Peter, for they talked in quite a different style now, having been kings and queens for so long, "Fair consorts, let us now alight from our horses and follow this beast into the thicket, for in all my days I've never hunted a nobler quarry." That's quite a language. I guess that's King Narnia language. "Sir," said the others, "even so let us do." And so they alighted and tied their horses to the tree and went on into the thick wood afoot. And as soon as they had entered it, Queen Susan said, "Fair friends, here is a great marvel, for I seem to see a tree of iron." "Madam," said King Edmund, "if you will look well upon it, you shall see it is a pillar of iron and a lantern set on top of it." "What's that? You see anything that you know about?" "By the lion's mane, a strange device," said King Peter, "to set a lantern there where the trees cluster, so thick about it and so high above it, that if it were lit, should be lit by no man." "Sir," said Queen Lucy, "by likelihood, when this post and this lamp were set here, There were smaller trees in the place, or fewer, or none. For this is a young wood, and the iron post is old. And they stood looking upon it. Then said King Edmund, I know not how it is, but this lamp on this post worketh upon me strangely. It runs in my mind that I've seen the like before, as it were in a dream, or in a dream of a dream. I think they have really grown up and they've forgotten some things, haven't they? Sir, answered they all, it is even so with us also. And more, said Queen Lucy, for it will not go out of my mind that if we pass this post and lantern, either we shall find strange adventure, or else something great changes our fortunes. Madam, said King Edmund, the like foreboding stirreth in my heart also. And in mine, fair brother, said King Peter. And in mine too, said Queen Susan. Wherefore, by my counsel, we shall lightly return to our horses and follow this white stag further. Madam, said King Peter, therein I pray thee to have me excused, for never since we four were kings and queens of Narnia have we set our hands to any higher matter, as battles, quests, feats of arms, acts of justice, and the like, and then given over, but always what we have taken in hand, the same we have achieved. Sister, said Queen Lucy, my royal brother speaks rightly, and it seems to me we should be shamed if for any fearing or foreboding we turn back from following so noble a beast as now we have in chase. And so I, said King Edmund, and I have such desire to find this significance of this thing that I would not by my good will turn back for the richest jewel in Narnia and all the islands. Then, in the name of Aslan, said Queen Susan, if ye will all have it so, let us go on and take the adventure that shall fall to us. That took a lot of fancy talking to get around to it, didn't it? So these kings and queens entered the thicket, and before they had gone a score of paces, they all remembered that the thing they had seen was called a lamppost. And before they had gone 20 more, they noticed that they were making their way not through branches, but through coats. And the next moment, they all came tumbling out of a wardrobe door into an empty room, and they were no longer kings and queens in their hunting array, but just Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy in their old clothes. It was the same day, the same hour of day, and on which they had gone into the wardrobe to hide. Mrs. Macready and the visitors were still talking in the passageway, but luckily they never came into the empty room, and so the children weren't caught. And that would have been the very end of the story if it hadn't been that they felt they really must explain to the professor why 4 of the coats out of the wardrobe were missing. Do you remember they put them on? And the professor, who was a very remarkable man, didn't tell them not to be silly or not to tell lies, but believe the whole story. No, he said, I don't think it will be any good trying to go back through the wardrobe and to get those coats. You won't get into Narnia again by that route. Nor would those coats be much good use by now if you did. What's that? Yes, of course you'll get back into Narnia someday. Once a king in Narnia, always a king in Narnia. But don't go trying to use the same route twice. Indeed, don't try to get there at all. It'll happen when you're not looking for it. And don't talk too much about it, even among yourselves. And don't mention it to anyone else. You find that they've had adventures of the same sort themselves. What's that? How will you know? Oh, you'll know all right. Odd things, they say. Even their looks will let the secret out. Keep your eyes open. Bless me, what do they teach them at those schools? The professor was such a great guy. He's like, what do they teach them at those schools? Keep quiet. Don't tell anyone about it. And that is the very end of this adventure of the wardrobe. But if the professor was right, it was only the beginning of the adventures of Narnia. You guys, they made it out of Narnia, and they were the same age as they were when they went into Narnia. It had all happened in what was just moments in the real world. They had gone across, they'd battled, they'd fought, they'd won, they'd become kings and queens. We're going to talk about it all tomorrow. But guys, I hope you enjoyed this book. I've loved it so much. It's one of my favorites. I hope you'll listen to it over and over again or read it over and over again as you grow older. There's always something more to find in Narnia. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. All right, have a great night, guys.